Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Blue Maxima, and I'm here checking out Crash Bandicoot 4. It's about time, and it really is about time. It's been like 10 years since the last proper Crash game, and 15 years since the last proper Crash game that was actually a collectathon platformer, so, you know, it's good to see it back. Whether or not it actually stuck the landing of bringing the franchise back, I mean, it got good reviews and all that, but I have a few nitpicks with it which have really kind of turned me off this. So I'm actually doing this in post-commentary, but the first few minutes of this video were recorded as a hi Bruce. The first few minutes of this video were recorded as a commentary in the moment sort of thing, so it's going to be a little bit slow getting through the options menu. But you do have the option to turn off lives, basically. You just die over and over again until you can actually finish the level, which is, you know, considering how old a mechanic that is, that's nice. Enhanced Shadows is also a really nice feature to have as well, and you'll see it when we get into the game, because this game kind of has a problem with depth perception when it comes to certain obstacles and all that, so it puts a really clear shadow with a yellow ring on the ground, which makes it really easy. I also appreciate being able to remap all the controls. Being able to turn off the motion blur is great because, fun fact, this was made by the people who did the Spyro trilogy, not the Crash trilogy, because they're the ones who did the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1+2. However, with the Spyro trilogy, it was a bit iffy on the motion blur because it actually gave me a lot of headaches when I was playing through. They thankfully added a patch to turn that off, so having it just be here straight away is great. There's also some decent sound sliders, although I think the music is a little bit quiet, and some really nice subtitle options. Like, they have a lot of subtitle options. So yeah, we just wander around the hub world for a bit. It works about the same as Crash Bandicoot 1, where you just open levels up as you go. But it's honestly a lot quicker just to use the level stats, because not only does it load everything a hell of a lot smoother, but it also shows you every level you've got unlocked. So you don't even have to go to a new level once you've unlocked it. You can just open the level stats straight away, which is kind of weird, kind of annoying, but there we go. I'm going to be showing off multiple different kinds of gameplay in this. There's going to be just basic Crash or Coco gameplay. They're the same, more or less. There's nothing particularly different between the two of them. I've also got a Tauna level, a Dingo Dial level, and some of the, what do they call it, the flashback levels? But yes, there is a plot. It's basically Cortex and Tropy taking over the world again so far. I've played about 5 hours, and I've gone through at least half of the levels in the game, at least the first time around, and that's pretty much all there is to the story, more or less. It's just Cortex and Entropy trying to take over the world, and even Uka Uka has been out of it. Like, they literally just have him, like, open up a portal, but then he passes out, and they're like, oh, let's leave him behind. And that's all you see of him for the first 5 hours of the game. I'm being serious. But yes, so the basic Crash and Coco gameplay. If you played the Insane trilogy, you know exactly what to expect here. They feel almost identical to their iterations in those games. You've got your double jump and your body slam, and your high jump stuff, so slide and then jump and then jump. You've got all of that. You don't have, like, the bazooka or the running shoes. I don't think the running shoes are going to make a comeback at all based on the way the controls have been put out. They feel fine to play, but just like the Insane trilogy, they're kind of missing a little bit of sharpness that the original game had. They're not as responsive, they're a little bit more floaty, and they're just, I mean, it's fine in the grand scheme of things. It's absolutely fine. I'm just saying it doesn't, exactly match up to the old games. I was hoping it would too. I mean, Wrath of Cortex had a bit of a problem with being too floaty. The Insane trilogy had that problem where it was a circle collision box and not a square collision box, so gaps you would just slide right off the edge of. I haven't had that problem too much in this game. Actually, I think I've barely had it at all. Like, there were one or two gaps where it was like, hey, there was one or two gaps where like, hey, I was like nowhere near hitting these in the first place. and I fell off. And that was fine. I was able to accept them. And there wasn't much else. But yes, they feel fine for the most part. I wish they were a little bit more sharp, a little bit more quick to the reactions, but what are you going to do? And as a result, platforming through all of these increasingly complex levels, it's actually a decently good time. At least on the pure gameplay sake of it. They've changed a few things, and a lot of the things that I'm actually kind of upset about with this remake don't have anything to do with the base gameplay. It's everything that's surrounding it. So, yeah. The characters themselves are fine. The enemies are a little bit disappointing. Now, if you've played Crash Bandicoot, especially the original trilogy, you'll know that when there is an error change, because just like the original trilogy before it, this has multiple different eras you can visit. Everything from, everything from like your original starting position in the present day on Insanity Beach, up to, say, the Ice Age, to the Pirate Years, to a few things like that, like a place that looks like Mardi Gras. It kind of looks like New Orleans or something like that, you know, a bloody festival town. Just things along those nature. You know that when you're playing these areas, in the original trilogy at least, they'd often go to the effort of changing up the enemy roster completely. So that you would see brand new enemies, you would see original enemies that would be more interesting to fight because you'd never seen them before. And you wouldn't see much in the way of repeats, whether it be enemies that do exactly the same thing as enemies from a previous era, or just the same enemy in general. Now, they do the latter, so there are definitely different looking enemies. As a matter of fact, all of the levels look great for the most part. I'll get to why I'm not too big of a fan of it, but for the most part, they look good. But the enemies, it just kind of seems like the same shit we've already seen before, if I'm being honest with you. And they don't really do much in the way of changing up the enemy variety. So you'll often be going up against the same enemies with no real tricks to them. Or at least if there are tricks, they're the same tricks that you've seen in anything from Crash 2 or 3. Where there'll be an enemy that walks back and forth, there'll be an enemy that'll just stand there. There'll be an enemy that you need to take out with a spin or you need to take out with a jump. In fact, they make very little use of the mask power-ups that you get, which I'll get to. It's part of the level design rant. But they make very little use of the power-ups that they give you via the masks in order to actually defeat enemies, which is a bit disappointing. But yeah, for the most part, it'll either be something you've already seen in Crash 2 or 3, or it'll be enemies that they feel like they've copy-pasted, but with just like a slightly different walk cycle, or a slightly different timing pattern, or just something that just doesn't make most of the enemies in this game seem unique. Not in the way that Crash 2 or 3 would actively change things up. Which would be okay if the levels were well designed enough to support it. Now, all of the levels in Crash 4 don't feel that different from one another. Doesn't matter what era you're in, doesn't matter what mask power-ups you get, it just doesn't seem to matter anything at all for the most part, at least up to the point that I've played. It's entirely possible. Like, admittedly, I have played some of the levels from way later on, but I'll get to that towards the end. But for the levels that I played in the campaign so far, which, again, 5 hours in, I've gotten a decent chunk of the game's levels done. For all the levels that I've played, all of them play very similar to each other, with very similar obstacles, i.e. the enemies. Hell, some of the levels feel like they're not even designed around the idea of the double jump. You very rarely have to actively make use of your double jump. It only mostly comes up during, say, the, what's it called? Mostly comes up during, say, bonus levels, or the flashback challenges. It's gonna feel like the same set of walking into the screen, taking out boxes, avoiding the same sort of enemies. Or a 2D platformer segment where you just have to try and climb up a lot. Like, now, I know that sounds like, oh, duh, you just explained, like, the entirety of Crash Bandicoot. But hear me out here. Think about the difference between something like Upstream, where the camera was angled just a little bit higher and you needed to do some relatively unique challenges platforming over some lily pads. Then think of, like, the challenge it would give you climbing over the challenge it would give you climbing over the rooftops in Crash Bandicoot 1's temple levels. And then think about, like, the challenge it would be in Toxic Waste, where you had to go towards the screen. There were these constant ramps going up, and you just kind of had to deal with that. Outside of a very few different set of set pieces in this game, they all feel kind of similar to each other. You do get access to the old Crash 3, like a motorized waveboard or wakeboard or whatever it's called, like twice. There are these new things which are like these grind rails, and you come across them a fair bit more often than I would have expected. And sometimes you get something like this, where you're just climbing up like this ice river and you've got to work your way across all these platforms. And those are kind of cute, but they're kind of few and far between compared to the rest of the level design, which starts to feel a bit samey after a while just because of how it doesn't really shake up the walk into the screen or platform in a 2D variety without doing, you know, something like that. This would have been helped out with the masks, because the masks are a clever idea in theory. You come across them and they give you an extra power-up to help you get through a certain section of the stage. The three I've come across, sorry. Time Stop, swapping platforms in and out, and like a tornado spin that you can't really control and makes the game even floatier, but helps you make really far jumps. But they're so restricted to their own sections that it feels like that they could have given you all of these power-ups in some way and made the actual stages harder and more interesting, especially if you had to combine flicking some of the platforms on and off with flicking some of the platforms on and off with flicking the tornado spin on and off, because the tornado spin, you can flick it off at any time for an instant drop, which you actually have to do once or twice. But once you figured that out, it's like there's no more challenge that can really be applied to it. And then they just consistently give you like the same sections with the same idea and don't really help fill it out a bit. Don't really combine it with anything more interesting. It's really just float this way or you die, more or less. And it's just kind of disappointing because the game ends up feeling surprisingly repetitive as a result. Just because they don't want to stray too far from the two-dimensional platforming or the three-dimensional walk into the screen sort of thing. There are also a couple of chase segments, but there was like one way back in like the second world. I'm up to world 6 and I haven't seen one since. So I don't know what's going on there. But it's kind of multiplied on top of that by some of the changes they've made to how the collectibles work. Because every level now has 6 gems. Normally, like, if this is Crash Bandicoot 2 or 3, I'd be like, oh, they're all going to be put in a really interesting spot, and it's going to make all the levels absolutely filled with interesting, like, side paths to go on. But no, because you see, 3 of these gems are just collecting 30, 60, and 80% of this Wumpa Fruit meter that feels entirely arbitrary. And then you've got your 4th gem, which is for breaking all the boxes in a level. So just stay with me here. If you're already going to collect all the boxes for the box gem, why would you, like, miss any Wumpa Fruit? Because they've actually made Wumpa Fruit a bit easier to deal with in this one. So whenever you smash a box in the original trilogy, if you spin again while the Wumpa Fruit are falling to the ground, you'll spin them away automatically. There's no way to make that happen, so unless you're actively, like, avoiding bouncing on the bouncing boxes, you're going to be collecting every single Wumpa Fruit you get along the way pretty damn easily. Especially since they've now added this new big-ass golden one that gives you, like, 25. So it means that all of these Wumpa Fruits are going to be really easy to get. So as a result, if you're going for like the box gems, you're going to be getting the other 3 gems just by force of habit. So I don't get why they bothered. It just seems weird. There is this thing going on where if you get 6 gems on a combined total of the regular version of the level and the inverted version of the level, you get a new skin, and there is a 105% completion bonus. But other than that, it just seems like collectibles for the sake of collectibles. Like, Super Mario Odyssey, for as much as some people like that game, did have some really repetitive moons that didn't really count as collectibles. They were just like sitting there and you just go and get them and that was it. But even that feels more like enjoyable as an idea than this, where it's just like 4 gems for doing something that would regularly just get you 1 anyway. And as a result, it makes the other gems feel a little bit redundant as well, just because there's so many of them that they don't feel special anymore. There are 2 other kinds of gems that are in each level as well. The 5th one I actually approve of, which is dying less than 3 times. And they've actually made all of these levels a fair bit longer. Like, there is not a single level in this game that I've seen so far that has less than 100 crates. And if you've played Crash 2 or 3 before, you know it takes a good long while to get to levels that have 100 crates. So, it's weird, but okay. It also might contribute to, like, the fatigue you might get for playing this, just because of, like, you know, again, 100 crates to smash in a level. It's kind of ridiculous, if only because, you know, you have to make the levels long enough to fit all those crates in. And there's a fair few situations where you have to go up and down, but I'll come back to the crates in a minute. But yeah, then the 6th one. Number 6 is a hidden gem. And the hidden gems are 90% of the time. There are some situations where they're actually down like their own gem path and give you a decent challenge to actually get them. And there are also colored gems, including one that I'd really like to rant about, but I'll get to that. But 80 to 90% of the gems in this game that are hidden are just off to the side. To just give you an example, on the inverted version of the game's first level, the secret gem is just hidden a little bit off camera to the right at the very beginning of the level. You literally walk right for 2 seconds and you collect that gem. It's just off screen as to where the camera starts out. You do have the ability to move the camera around a little, but it honestly feels kind of pointless. But yes, so when you've got 80% of these hidden gems that are just kind of like, they're just a tiny bit off the hidden path, to the point where if you turned up the field of view of the camera a little, all of the paths there they are on, like all of the the very minor jumps you often have to do to get them, are just will just be in view the whole time. And it just feels weird as a result. I don't know why they put in the effort of putting in all of these gems. You do also have a new kind of relic, which is the insanely perfect relic, which is, I believe, get every box and not die once, or possibly just not die once. It might be not die once, but the relics are the same. You know, 3 different relics you can get depending on your time, so I don't know why they've gone to the effort of adding all these gems. And there are 6 gems for the regular version of the levels, and 6 gems for the inverted versions. There's like 500 fucking gems in this game, and 60% of them are just like no effort whatsoever. And it's weird. It makes me not want to go for gems. Because in the original Crash Bandicoot, gems were special. There was like 1 gem that you might get. And that 1 gem would be like, you know, get all the boxes in the level, which was a legitimate challenge. It still is. Still is a legitimate challenge, but then you've got all these other gems just being thrown at you left, right, and center. And it just doesn't feel challenging anymore. And it also doesn't help that some of the gems are also really weirdly hidden. Now, for those of you who've played Crash Bandicoot 2, Turtle Woods, blue gem, get no crates. There is also a blue gem that requires you to get no crates in this game, but the game doesn't give you the hint on how to do it. So, the thing about Turtle Woods is that there was a line of like 10 crates, and these 10 crates were 2x5, so they were just tall enough for you to not be able to jump over under regular circumstances. They were all regular crates, except for one on top, which was a bouncy crate, which gave you that tiny little bit of a hint that, hey, I can avoid this entirely. Maybe I can get no crates at all on this level and see what happens. The one level that I played that I missed the hidden gem on, and I'm like, you know what? I have no idea where that hidden gem was, because I was looking really hard for it. Couldn't find it. So I went and looked it up on the internet. And it turns out it was the level that you needed to get, like, no crates on. And I'm thinking back over this level thinking, you fucking kidding me? There's, like, no hint or any, like, chance of finding out where that blue gem is. Maybe it's something they give you, like, a hint on towards, like, the end of the game. But I have no idea how I was supposed to figure that out by myself at this point. And it's just oddly frustrating as a result. You know what else is oddly frustrating? You know what I said about moving the camera? Sometimes it's not useful. Sometimes you completely miss crates. So there are these crates. They often, and this isn't just like an isolated incident. They often hide one fucking crate off to the side, just outside of where the camera can see it. To the point where you'll just completely miss it whenever you go through. And it makes me bang my head against, like, the desk or the wall or the table every single time, because it is legitimately impressive just how many of these bastard crates exist in this game. Hell, Torna, one of the other characters you get to play, has this grappling hook, and 80% of the use of the grappling hook is firing at crates that are just outside your field of vision if you go too far forward. There are so many of these crates that are just hidden in the most bastard of places that make them really hard to see, that will make you miss a 100% completion box gem. There's so many of them, and it's legitimately really goddamn frustrating when they come up. So after a while, I just kind of stopped caring. I kept going for the Wumpa gems because they were just really easy to get, but the crate gems I just kind of gave up on because I missed so many just out of the corner of my eye. Or it was like, oh, you missed 12 crates. How the fuck did I miss 12 crates? There was no, like, extra paths or anything anywhere. There are also gem paths, but those are very few and far between. I've only seen 2 so far. I don't even know where the colored gems are, so I can't give you opinions on those. So yeah, as a result, I just find myself not really enjoying the collectathon part of the collectathon platformer. Just because of how many, like, weird things they do with it. Now, there are some other mechanics I haven't gotten into yet. There are also the flashback levels. The flashback levels are... they're called in story as Cortex training up Crash in his lab. And it's a clever idea. They're 2D platforming challenges that are basically way more intense bonus stages with checkpoints. So you need to try and get through them. They're really complicated, like bouncing crate puzzles, like the old Crash Bandicoot ones, right? The first game. You get them by playing through the levels and not dying until you get to them, like the old death paths. What makes them uninteresting is that they're often so early on in the level that it just feels kind of irrelevant to have them be, like, 0 death collectibles. It's also not helped out by the fact that if there is a level that you're having trouble with, dying at the beginning of a level doesn't reset your death count. So if you die, like, before you get to the first checkpoint, to put your death count back down to 0, you have to actively restart the level from the pause menu. Why they did it like that, I have no idea, but they did. Still, those levels are legitimately fun though, although they kind of expose the wonkier side of the platforming. Sometimes you'll walk across the crate and it'll break. Sometimes you'll walk across the crate and it won't break. You'll just stroll right across it. It's a little weird sometimes. There are also Torna and Dingodile levels. So Torna and Dingodile are old characters and they have some extra abilities to help out. They roughly play the same, outside of these new abilities though. But the ability for Torna, as you can see here, is the grappling hook. just lets it fly to predetermined grappling points. And she can also wall jump at specific points, but it's nothing like particularly game-changing. And there's Dingo Dial, who has a suction cannon, who can suck up TNT barrels and fire them, suck up crates in general, and that's pretty much it. He's also got like a sort of like little hover thing, but it doesn't really come into the game much. But the interesting way they do these levels is that they present them like the old secret exit levels from Crash 2, where you'd go into the level and you do it, and then when you come back out to the level proper, because the in-game justification is Dingo and Torna having effects on Crash and Coco's level progression that they don't understand until you play the levels in question, right? But yeah, you play up to the end of the Torna section or the Dingo Dial section, which are usually pretty short. And then you swap back to the Crash or the Coco version of the level, which you've already played, but it makes them harder. It adds more crates. They technically count as their own levels, so they add more crates in. They have their own death things, they have their own hidden gems, but the hidden gems are usually even easier to find. And the harder versions of the levels aren't really that much harder. Sometimes they rely on some really iffy platforming mechanics like this one here, but other than that, they're just like not that interesting. Which is a shame, because the death paths in Crash 2 and Crash 3 used to be absolutely brutal. The alternate paths used to be absolutely brutal. But there doesn't seem to be anything in the way of like Crash 2's like unlockable levels, where you'd find like these really secret hidden things, like the alien sign that you have to run over in Crash 3, or the Nitro staircase that you have to climb in Crash 2. They're just like slightly different iterations of these levels that aren't that much harder because they have to design them around an already existing part of the level.
That's what I've always liked about you.
So as a result, I don't enjoy the majority of the levels anywhere near as much as I do as Crash 1, 2, or 3. It is sort of kind of helped out a bit by some of the gameplay changes they made. Like as I talked about before, the big shadow underneath you now with like the yellow ring is a really nice touch, and it really helps you know where you're going to land, especially in this game where there can be some depth problems. I do appreciate how the villains can now mock you in level, but then you can just spin like their communication method to tell them to shut up and go away. Although the writing is clever enough that I usually leave them alone, unless I have to replay a certain segment of a level a lot. And I really like the multiplayer modes they've added in, actually, because they've done that. They've added a cooperative mode. They've added pass and play, where if you die, or if you get to a checkpoint, you pass the controller on to another player, and when you get to the end, your performances are individually tallied, and you find out who the best is. And there's also like two individual modes, where one is you race against the clock, checkpoint to checkpoint, and the other one is that you race the entire level, checkpoint by checkpoint, but crates give you score bonuses. It's a really clever idea, and you can actually play like really later on levels in the game using this mode, because they're all unlocked from the very beginning for some reason. So you can at least see what you're about to be up against. And I went and looked, and like they were levels. Certainly harder versions of the levels, but they were levels nonetheless. They just... yeah. They're just kind of missing that Crash spirit, you know? They've got the absolute basics down. They've got smashing crates. They've got platforming. They've got into the screen, out of the screen, and two-dimensional platforming segments. And they've got some interesting powers that you have, they've got some interesting powers that you unlock throughout the course of the game. But they don't have things like the unique secret exits that Crash 2 or Crash 3 have. They don't have the unique variety in each era like Crash 2 and Crash 3 had. They didn't have, like, they don't have like really special collectibles like Crash 2 or Crash 3 have. And they're just not as interesting as a result. They've got bonus paths, and they're really hard. But, like, there's no difference. Like, that's how it was in Crash 2 and Crash 3. Those bonus bits got a bit difficult. But yeah, they've got the absolute basics down, but they've just missed a tiny bit of what makes Crash Bandicoot as great as it is. It's competent, but not exceptional. It doesn't feel like they were really paying attention to what made these games so great. So I'm not going to say I didn't enjoy my time with Crash Bandicoot 4, but at the end of the day, I have 100% completed Crash 1, 2, and 3 several times in my life. And this time around, I just don't think I can be bothered. It's a good game. The Crash 1 through 3 were exceptional. And this game just kind of missed a lot of the lessons that those games taught. It's just... It doesn't feel like a Crash game. It feels like someone's made a... It feels like someone's made the economy model of the Crash game. It does what it needs to, but not much more. And as a result, I just find myself being disappointed in it. Considering how long they've had to work on it, considering what they had to have a look at. I mean, the Insane trilogy, that's not exactly the place I'd take the platforming mechanics from, but that's what they did. It's not the place that I would, like, it's the place that I would take the collectibles from, and not the platforming. But this kind of did neither in the right way. It's weird. So, is there anything else I even have to say about it? I'm honestly not sure. So yeah. Crash 4, at its base, is a competent Crash game. And there are some neat things that it does here and there. But it kind of misses all the little details about what makes a Crash Bandicoot game truly great. Even Crash the Wrath of Cortex. Now, a lot of people hate on the Wrath of Cortex, but at least it understood what made the Crash Bandicoot progression system, as enjoyable as it was. Crash 4 just doesn't do that. Doesn't do it in the same way. Is it dumbing down? Is it just trying to appeal to different kinds of people? Like the sort of people who will like really, really look for that one crate that they put way off in the corner that you can't see? I don't know. It just doesn't feel right. I'm not going to outright go against recommending it, but I wouldn't recommend you buy it at full price. Leave it for like half, $30 US, or maybe something a little less. The Insane trilogy probably goes for a lot less than that these days, and I'd argue that's more worth it just as a more satisfying game with how it handles its level design, its collectibles, its general theme. Yeah. I've said everything I'm basically going to say at this point without turning into a rambling mess, so I'm going to shut up and let you watch the rest of this gameplay without my annoying voice over the top of it. This has been Blue Maxima. I'll see you all next time.
another. Rat! That's a dead one. My experiment! Uh-oh, it looks like that's the birthday alarm. Happy birthday, subject. Rest now, sweet Bandicoot. Next time, perhaps. My experiment. Embryo, the mob. Experiment failed. Embryo, the Revivotron.
That's more like it. Now, which way's we going? Stagnant water. Smells like home.